Sustainability is a highly contested term, and as we are surrounded by greenwashing, it can be confusing for anyone in the industry and our customers to understand exactly what is and is not a sustainable investment. But luckily, the sentiments underpinning sustainability are not only becoming more and more important to us all, they can be a real catalyst for innovation and a creative care in jewelry brands. One jewelry designer maker has focused on sustainability both through incorporating sustainable practices and more subtly by leaving and in some cases highlighting the maker's processes in her pieces. When a customer buys something handmade with care and passion, it inspires their care, counteracting both the aesthetics and the all too prevalent fast fashion behaviors. For the BAJ podcast today, I'm excited to welcome a jewelry designer with a clear sustainability vision and style, Sian Evans. Welcome, Sian.
Thank you very much, Sophie.
So, Sian, to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Okay, so I am not a young jeweler. So I've had a lot of practice at being a jeweler now. I graduated in 1986, and I moved to London to study from Dorset. So I spent from 8 to 18 in Dorset, being kind of surrounded by the Jurassic Coast and lots of archaeology. After college, after my BA, I set up my jewelry company almost immediately, and started in Spitalfields in a derelict building with some friends. And within a few months was making jewelry and trying to get collections together. And from then, I haven't stopped, basically. I was in my first studio in Spitalfields for 11 years and grew my brand, I suppose it was then, and sold internationally. Moved to Clerkenwell. I was in Clerkenwell for 21 years. And during that time, I was selling internationally, again, silver designer collections and working in collaboration with people. And then in 2001, I took up a post at Central St Martin's and worked at Central St Martin's for 13, 14 years. So in 2014, I then went back to my practice full time, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
And then what made you decide to become a jeweler? And how did you then sort of gain all the skills that you need to be a jeweler?
I was really interested in archaeology and a bit of a nerd, but at the same time, I was really interested in fashion and music. And I made all my own clothes, and I loved body adornment. But I also, because I was interested in archaeology, I was interested in the history of body adornment and worked on archaeological sites, and was also fascinated by how the things that I saw that I dug up and the things and artifacts that I saw in museums, how they were made. So when I was a student, I was trying to use processes then that had some kind of historical context to them, which many jewelry processes do, because they haven't actually really changed very much. But I was very aware of, old ways of doing things because I'd been to too many museums as a child. My dad's an artist, so there was a lot of art history in the household, a lot of context for fine art practice, lots of thinking about that, lots of opportunities to draw. Also lots of engineers in my family. So I think I've inherited a kind of engineering, problem-solving brain. So I think that context of fashion, music, engineering, processes, and an artistic background all kind of almost set me up for being a jeweler, really.
You head up your own company under your own name. Could you tell us a little bit more about this brand that you established and why you decided to start your own business?
Well, I graduated in 1986, as you say, as a a designer maker. My course was at Sir John Cass, and it was called BA Jewellery, Silversmithing and Allied Crafts. And actually, a lot of the staff at the Cass at that time were really fantastic goldsmiths and silversmiths, and they gave their time very willingly. So I learned really how to be a goldsmith and a silversmith, and that the design bit, there wasn't actually that much of it. So that gave me a really good starting point. But my early collections were really, what I wanted to do was to set up a little company which was fashion forward and show my twice yearly collections like a fashion designer at London Fashion Week. I had a vision that I wanted to sell my work alongside Vivienne Westwood and Catherine Hamnett in the same kinds of shops. And my course hadn't given me any groundwork or anything that would help me understand how to do that. So that's what I learned to do, was to, and there were very few companies like mine around at the time. There weren't opportunities, but I had a very good grounding in making. And I think because of my artistic background and my interest in fashion, and I was very interested and followed fashion, that I could find a context for that and do it. And I'm extremely tenacious. So putting together a collection, and then before the internet, before computers virtually, getting it out there and doing the legwork, drawing my own catalogues, doing all of this kind of groundwork behind the scene, and literally turning up to the best shops with my box of goodies and not going away until I got an answer. Really tenacious. When I got my first studio, it was super cheap. Like I say, it was almost derelict. Can you believe Spitalfields being derelict? But it was. So it was super cheap, and I rented out extra space to my friends. So I virtually paid nothing. And I had a tiny grant at that time from the government, a setting up grant, which sustained me. So my overheads were super, super low. So I could do what I wanted to do full time, just with a little bit of what you called outwork from a couple of companies. So I filed up castings and, did very mundane sort of jewelry making bits and bobs, but it allowed me to work full time. So I've never been, or at least at that time, was never part-time. Mm-hmm. I just went for it, which would be very difficult to do now. So keeping your overheads low and finding some work that you can do in your own space, so you don't actually have to go out to work, was important for me. So I was always in my studio.
Your work, the things that you make as part of your business, often feature, as you describe yourself, the mark of the maker's hand and time. And you visibly have a really great interest in jewelry technologies and archaeology, as you mentioned. Could you tell us about your inspiration and how that translates into your work?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in having, I guess, a little bit of a control freak. So when I was a younger jeweler and doing my fashion collections, which were in silver, by the way, they weren't in plastic or anything like that, that I wanted my work to look like my work, and I employed people in my studio to help me make my collection. So it was all done in-house. I never sent things off, or very, very rarely sent things off to be done, because I didn't like that, because when they came back from somewhere else, they didn't look like my work. They were too shiny, or, the edges had been rounded off, and it just, the language of my way of working was lost. So that has always been a part of my practice, is to do everything. And again, that control freaky thing of, to do everything, you have to learn loads and loads of techniques. So I've been a kind of collector of techniques, mainly old school goldsmithing techniques, some silversmithing techniques, things that will help me make work that looks like my work. And it's handmade, so it's a bit wonky. It was never important to me to make work that looked like a machine had made it, because I think one of the things that some jewelers aspire to is perfection, that idea of perfection, which now is enabled very easily using CAD programs and rapid prototyping. So actually that's a much more easier thing to do as long as you're a good CAD designer. Making perfection is really easy, and actually fabricating work is much harder. So it's important for me that people can see that they're handmade, and you do that by not making them totally perfect. So each piece I'd make is slightly different, even if it's the same design. Even if it's the same design, somebody's getting a unique piece.
You also mentioned time, because techniques like you are explaining them to me are also about not rushing necessarily to get it not perfect, but right.
Well, yes, the rightness in my work is the wrongness in some other people's work, I guess. I really enjoy making things and get lost in making. Yes, and it's sometimes when you're making something, you know, it's something's maybe a little bit wonky, and I'll choose to maybe remove that if it's wonky in the wrong way, or keep it because it's beautiful. I'm very interested in in process marks, the marks that processes leave behind that tell you perhaps a little bit about how it's been made. And those can be beautiful, especially I think in casting. I use several kind of very ancient types of casting, which allows that. I mean, I could be a medieval goldsmith, you know, it's kind of that kind of care and attention and sort of willful disregard for modernity.
And so sustainability is something you value greatly. What sustainable practices have you introduced into your brand and the business?
That idea of doing everything yourself makes my practice completely visible. I use only recycled metals, and a lot of those metals I recycle myself. It's not like I go to a bullion dealer and buy their recycled metal. I'm doing that myself by encouraging my customers to bring broken bits and bobs to me, which I then melt down, and I'll clean the alloy a bit and you know, make sure that it's a nice coloured alloy. And the same with stones. Lots of people have got rings that have got stones missing and they don't know what to do with them, or, you know, they've got one earring left out of a pair. So I take those stones sometimes as a swap, or sometimes I'll make something for that client from those. So this removes sort of any necessity from any mining. Mining is a problem. I did a geology A level because I was on the Jurassic Coast in Weymouth, being as a young thing being brought up. So I was always very aware of where materials come from. And it was something that dawned on me while I was teaching at Central St Martin's, is my students didn't know where things came from. So a lot of my practice is about this storytelling, about where things come from and what is sustainable and what sustainability means to me. So that idea of knowing where your materials come from, that they may have been mined hundreds of years ago. Of course, they have been mined, but in using them again, you haven't caused any more environmental degradation. It's all kept in the studio, and the amount of energy that I use recycling my gold is much less than an industrial recycler. And it's been done in my studio. It hasn't had to travel to Europe to be refined and then be sent back. It's in my studio. So I mean, that's mainly what I do now, is I work in gold and old stones. And additionally to that, as a form of storytelling, again, which reveals something more about mining and especially stones, is that I now use Scottish pebbles and carve them. Now, it sounds very low, sort of low levels. I carve Scottish pebbles, but there's a huge history of Scottish pebble jewellery, and they're not actually really pebbles. They're beautiful agates and beautiful jaspers, which occur in abundance in Scotland, and they're collected for me by geologists, and I carve them again in my studio. During lockdown, I set myself a project to up my lapidary skills. I was actually taught stone carving in 2006 by the marvelous Charlotte Desillus, and I'm back with her studying more at the moment. But yeah, it's very old school. A lot of it is grinding and polishing with sticks. So again, it's really sustainable. You don't use much energy. Maybe I eat more because I have to power my arms a bit more.
It reminds me of sort of the thinking of urban mining as well, where you
Yeah.
use what you can find, whether that is through people's houses or perhaps close by in nature. And has it changed your approach? If people come to you with a material, you haven't had a design idea in advance and gone and sourced the materials become perhaps stimuli for what you can create.
I have ways of working, that are definitely, you could identify them as my aesthetic. So when people bring me their materials, they're coming to that mainly. Sometimes people will want me to do something that's very unlike what I do normally, but most of the time it's very much a Sian Evans kind of way of working. So that's often a dialogue that I have with people that come to me. At the moment, my focus is and especially because I'm on a residency in West Somerset to stone carve. It's very much on developing shapes with stones that I've collected to add more to a collection that I'm currently developing. So yeah, it's more of what I call Tanis, the stone collection. So sort of yes and no.
Thinking about sustainability in the industry, are there any changes you would like to see materialized in the near future so we have a more sustainable industry, more broadly speaking?
Yes, I just wish people would stop buying things. And if they are going to buy something, really, really consider it rather than throw away things. We hardly need any stuff. And if you are going to buy a piece of jewelry, make sure it's worth it. Our customers are becoming a little bit more aware through other industries, through fashion industry problems and through food industry problems, which are getting highlighted more. That, I mean, if you're going to buy a piece of jewelry, make sure that you know a bit about it, and maybe save up for it so you're not buying crap.
To any sort of starting jewelers listening, do you have any sort of top tips to become more sustainable, perhaps from the get-go? And how could they contribute to a more sustainable industry?
Well, I think we will become more sustainable if we can tell very good stories about our work and having very sound reasons for doing it in the first place. Again, if you haven't got good reasons for doing your work, you're likely to be a terrible designer, and the work is likely to be awful. So that having that really good grounding in research and analysis and taking the time to really create good work that is original and that people will cherish.
That's sound advice. Your designs are all handmade. Was that a decision? We've sort of touched upon it before, but that you really consciously make? And how important is then the craftsmanship of that making in all of the pieces and the aesthetic of your work?
The hand making comes really from my control freakiness about where things come from and who's doing what to what, in order that I can control and what's going on and that it's traceable. Plus the fact that I love making things, obviously. Yeah, so it's about that traceability from source to the customer.
You are very active in the industry, exhibiting your work widely and promoting your work also creatively through social media. What do you feel these sort of two channels of communication and dissemination provide you and your brand? And are there perhaps more that you think are very important?
Oh, well, I live by my work. It's my income. So I am active in different media so that people can see it. So if it's hidden, if it's not out there, then I'm not going to communicate to people who want to have a piece of my work in their collections. So that's an important way of existing. Having a successful practice is actually speaking through social media to your customers, your potential customers.
And is your strategy with social media to communicate the work or also encourage people to come and see it in person? Because a lot of your work is so beautiful when you hold it in your hands and you can see the light.
Well, jewelry is made to be worn, so it's made to be touched and felt. Yes, social media helps a lot because you can get a good idea, but I'm using it so that people will want to come and see me. Yes, it's kind of fundamental. If I'm not talking about my work and storytelling and telling the or handing over the information that sort of is the basis of what I do, then people won't want to come and see it. It's all part of the whole thing.
What designs and shows, you've mentioned that you're on a residency at the moment, but what things are you currently working on that we could look forward to discovering in the near future?
Well, I've had a great couple of years. I've won a couple of awards for my stone carving, even though I'm a rookie. One of them was from the Goldsmiths Design Crafts Council, and that spurred me on to take my lapidary work more seriously. And I went on to be awarded a Quest, a Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust Award to study cameo intaglio carving. So I'm working on a whole new body of work, which again is about storytelling, which hopefully I'll have enough of to reveal at the Goldsmiths Fair at the end of September, and at Elements Festival of Gold and Silver in Edinburgh in October. So that's kind of why I'm on my residency, to try and concentrate on some stone carving without all of the kind of clutter that I have in my London studio.
Our world is facing a range of challenges, and sustainable practices and mindsets are of the utmost importance for anyone producing, even when it is artistic objects that will hopefully be cherished for many generations to come. Jewelry designer makers like Sian approach the multifaceted topic with care, setting a clear example that it can be done and celebrated. Thank you, Sian, for your time, sketching out your inspirational journey to date, and for joining me for the BAJ podcast. We are super grateful for your efforts and input.
Thank you very much, Sophie.
Next month, I'll be joined by another guest, so watch this space to find out who it is. But for now, this was Sophie Boons for the BAJ podcast episode titled The Sustainable Touch with Sian Evans. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.